Hey class, how's it going? So here we are at Unit 5, Realism. I find this to be a particularly fascinating development. It's going to have transatlantic impact. And after having completed the reading, I think you should start to see how there's been this real interesting shift from neoclassicism to romanticism and now to realism. So, what I want to do here is just break down a few different base pieces of realism. You're going to be watching a lot of art analysis in this unit. And so I want you to spend a lot of time looking at how art can encapsulate an entire philosophical period at that time. So let's go ahead and get started. So, really, the first couple of things that we need to talk about are what exactly is realism? And so, obviously, like all of these things, we need to go back to the preceding eras and investigate what the preceding philosophies look like and how they shaped society. So, as we know, Romanticism very much dealt with these ideal, even if it's the darkness and that sublime of the human heart, they're very focused on ideals and moving away from the specificity of the Enlightenment. And so there was a lot of romantic literature, for example, a field I'm quite well versed in, would have a dashing hero rushing across the battlefield to save his injured comrade, throwing him over his shoulder and rushing back. We love romanticism. Romanticism makes us feel good. It makes us feel alive. It makes us feel these large ideal. When I say ideal, I don't mean perfect, but these big raw feelings. And as many of us know, most of our day to day is substantially more real. It's gritty. We have setbacks that don't have explanation. They don't fit within any nice story or context. We go for a walk in the park, and at the end of it, we don't necessarily feel better. And this is where we end up with realism. So, as we move into right now, as you know, we're in chapter 28, but we're going to be moving into chapter 29. And in 29, we're going to be looking at how romanticism and realism impact the United States. But to give you an idea, kind of a fast forward idea, is that pre Civil War, the United States, the predominant philosophical tendencies were towards romanticism. And then after the horrors of the Civil War, 600,000 young men dying, mostly young men dying, during a period where the American population was substantially smaller, was absolutely devastating. And uncles and brothers and fathers coming home with severed limbs and not known at the time, but PTSD. So realism is going to become popular around the mid 1800s. We're also going to see, and this is not to say that romanticism completely dies or anything along those lines, but there's just the shift more to the realistic and less to these highfalutin ideals of situations. And so the other thing that we're going to see is, especially in France and to some extent in the United States because of the Civil War, is, the byproduct of the Enlightenment and this notion that life can always be improved through enlightenment there, were the revolutions, both the American and the French revolutions. And while those revolutions brought about fantastic change, there were a lot of people in the decades after, 50 up to 50, 60 years afterwards, who were asking some pretty big questions because they saw in the new upper class, they saw the same corruption that they had witnessed in the aristocracies. And we see this in particular when we look at the Raft of the Medusa painting and the aristocracy and the wealthy still being the only ones controlling power and controlling decision making. And so there were a lot of questions about these revolutions and how effective were they to actually change the status quo of who got to make decisions, because that's the basis for democracy, is who gets to make the decisions. And a lot of people were saying, And then in the United States at that time period, we have the Civil War, which rattled the very foundations of democracy in our own country. So the Romantic period and the idealism of that gets kind of cast aside as people start to seek out more realistic scenarios. So, what becomes valued in realism? Common people. There's a element of social protest, and the social protest is a rebellion against, like I said, the corruption of the aristocracy. We continue to see that. We also see the everyday, regardless of social class. The realists were very interested in just everyday occurrences of everybody. It wasn't as often lower and middle class people, but the everyday occurrences were the common everyday experiences of people is what started to become of primary focus. So that's realism. Got a lot of art analysis, as I mentioned. Also going to talk a little bit about literature. And just a heads up as before I break here is that we are in chapter 28. We have chapter 29. So this would be, right now we're in unit 5. Coming up, we're going to have unit 6. Oh, sorry. And then as soon as we hit unit 7, you're going to see your midterm. And so unit 7 is your midterm exam. So get ready for that. It's on its way. All right. As always, if you have any questions, let me know.